Now, if you're planning on buying a budget 5G phone in the price range of about 10 to 11,000 rupees, there are two really good options that you can consider. One is the newly launched Moto G34 and the other one is the Redmi 13C. Now, I did want to make a video on the G34, but I decided to actually compare the two and figure out which one of these two should you pick up and what the market is looking like. Well, let's get down to the comparison of these two phones. If you're here for the first time, I'm Ershad, you're watching Trakin English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Starting off with the design, I think the Moto G34 looks better than the Redmi 13C, at least to my eyes. The thing with the Redmi 13C is that it uses a glossy plastic back. The color is not offensive as much as the patterns are. I'm not really a fan of this. In comparison, I really like this design of the Moto G34, especially that raised camera module makes it look unique and more premium in this segment. I know that a lot of folks don't particularly like the raised camera module, which is why I think design is subjective. Which one do you like? Let me know in the comment section below. What isn't subjective, however, is the fact that the Moto G34 is a smaller, lighter and slimmer phone compared to the Redmi 13C. Therefore, it's also more comfortable to hold and use. And I think that the size is perfect and even the screen size is perfect for most people. This is definitely a better, more comfortable phone to hold and use every day. Also, the Moto G34 has a vegan leather back at the rear at this price, and therefore the grip is also further enhanced and it also adds to the premium feel, look and feel of the phone. Now, ports and buttons wise, it is very similar on both. You get a Type-C port at the bottom, you've got a 3.5mm headphone jack, you've got a power button, you've got a volume rocker, and you've also got a SIM card tray. By the way, the power button has an embedded fingerprint scanner on both the phones. We tested it out, both are really fast to unlock, nothing to separate the two really. There are a couple of differences that I did notice between the two phones. The Redmi 13C offers a proper full tray, which includes support for 2 nano SIM cards and of course a micro SD card as well. Whereas on the G34, you get a hybrid SIM slot. However, on the G34, you get a stereo speaker setup along with the earpiece, which is not the case with the Redmi 13C, which is a mono setup. But most importantly, the G34 also has IP52 rating. There's no IP rating on the Redmi 13C. So when it comes to the design and the build quality, the G34, especially in this price class, feels and looks more premium for sure, and of course it's got all the functional elements that you would want in this price category. On the display front, you've got a 6.5-inch display on the Moto G34 and you've got a 6.74-inch one on the Redmi 13C. Of course, the Redmi 13C's display is bigger. Now, both the displays use IPS LCD tech and the resolution is actually HD+. I think both these brands could have actually gone for a Full HD display, which would have definitely elevated the multimedia experience for sure. As for the refresh rate, you get 120Hz refresh rate on the G34, whereas you get 90Hz on the Redmi 13C, which again gives the G34 a bit of an advantage. Brightness wise, both are neck to neck. You get 580 nits of peak brightness on the G34, whereas you get 600 nits of peak brightness on the Redmi 13C. We tested them outside in direct sunlight and they seem to be both equally legible and fairly readable too. Interestingly, both these phones also support wideband L1 certification. I thought that they would come with only L3 certification. It's good that they've gone for wideband L1, so you can actually stream HD videos on Netflix and Amazon Prime as well. But the best thing about the G34's display is that it's actually got a punch hole camera, whereas the Redmi 13C has a water drop notch. A punch hole is better than water drop. And that apart, you've also got slim bezels on all 4 sides, and therefore you get more screen estate as well. Overall, the display on the G34 is slightly more modern looking compared to the one on the Redmi 13C. Now, if you're looking at the multimedia experience, the advantage for the G34 is that you've got a stereo speaker setup along with support for Dolby Atmos as well. Compared to the Redmi 13C's mono setup, of course, the G34 sounds better. Take a listen to it for yourself and let me know what you guys think. So overall, if you look at it for multimedia experience, when you're looking at the display and speakers, the G34 would be my pick over the Redmi 13C. Now here's a fun fact. Up until 2023, the Snapdragon 695 was inside phones that cost anywhere between 15 to 20,000. And during that time, I used to actively persuade you guys from not picking up a Snapdragon 695 phone because it didn't feel like a value for money processor. Having said that, when you have a Snapdragon 695 chipset inside a phone that costs anywhere between 10,000 to 12,000 depending on the variant that you're buying, then it's a completely different ballgame altogether. So yeah, the G34 has Snapdragon 695 and the Redmi 13C has the Dimensity 6100 Plus. Now performance wise, both are very similar, but in Antutu, we noticed that the Snapdragon 695 actually scored higher than the Dimensity 6100 Plus. In fact, even in Geekbench, we got a higher single core and multi-core score as well. So definitely the Snapdragon 695 seems to be performing slightly better. But when you're buying a budget phone, what you want to consider is if the phone stutters in daily usage, are there any hiccups, are there any frame drops? All of that are definitely not a problem on both these phones. But what I will say is that the G34 seems and feels slightly more smoother in daily operations, that's for sure. Now, if you're a gamer, of course, these are budget phones, these are not meant for gaming, but if you do want to game, you can actually play BGMI at smooth ultra graphics or, about 40 FPS. And that's true for both the phones, by the way. And by the way, both these phones also support the UFS 2.2 storage type, so you do get fairly decent read-write speeds of over 500 Mbps, which is damn good. So overall, if you look at it performance-wise, I think the G34 has a bit of a lead over, the Redmi 13C. But where the Snapdragon 695 comfortably beats the Dimensity 6100 Plus is in the 5G performance itself. Because what you do get is more 5G bands. You get support for 13 5G bands on the Moto G34 compared to 7 on the Redmi 13C. That apart, you also do get support for 4 carrier aggregation. You also do get support for voice over NR. Basically, you can make calls over 5G as well. Generally, if you look at the 10 to 12,000 price category, if you're buying a phone, most of these phones give you compromised 5G experience. So you'll have fewer 5G bands, you won't have 4 carrier aggregation, you won't have 4x4 MIMO, you won't have, VoNR. All of that is sorted in the G34. So if I'm recommending a budget phone for best 5G experience, then obviously the G34 would come to my mind. Now, talking about the battery life, you get the same 5000 mAh battery inside both the phones, and you get support for 20 watt fast charging on the G34 compared to 18 watt on the Redmi 13C. But the Redmi 13C only bundles a 10 watt charger inside the box, where the Moto G34 bundles a 20 watt charger inside the box, which is definitely good because you don't have to spend extra money for the faster charger. So therefore, out of the box charging experience will be much better on the G34 because it will charge faster. But when it comes to battery life experience, both are very, very similar, both are very well tuned. We noticed about 1.5 days of battery life on both the phones, so that's not too much of an issue. Alright, let's talk about the software. And when you talk about software experience on both these phones, easily the Moto G34 wins for me, hands down. Mainly because you get Android 14 out of the box and you also get a promise of 1 year of software update. In comparison, the Redmi 13C has MIUI and it has Android 13 out of the box, and software update situation I'm not so sure of. Moreover, the Redmi 13C has a lot of bloatware apps that are pre-installed. Of course, they all can be uninstalled, but they are pre-installed, and there are dark patterns in the whole setup process as well, which is something that I've definitely spoken about in the past too. It's not like the G34 doesn't have pre-installed app. It has Facebook and LinkedIn pre-installed, and it has a few smart app folders as well. Now, if you open these folders, there are a lot of app recommendations, nothing dirty, nothing untoward, but these are just recommendations that these apps are not pre-installed. But what I would have appreciated is if we had the option to maybe hide it or uninstall it or delete those smart folder recommendations. But yeah, I mean, it does exist. But overall, if you look at it, Moto G34 is definitely a much cleaner software experience, and it has a lot of useful features as well. In fact, in the 128GB variant of the phone, which is the one that we tested, you've got support for Ready for 2, and you've got the Secure Hub. All of that, I think, elevates the user experience by quite a bit. Alright, finally talking about the cameras, the Moto G34 has a 50 megapixel primary camera and a 2 megapixel macro camera, and on the front you've got a 16 MP selfie camera. And hardware wise, I think the Redmi doesn't hold up, except for the fact that you've got a 50 MP primary camera, but you've got a 0.08 MP auxiliary lens, which I don't know what it exactly does. And on the front, you've got a compromised 5 MP selfie camera. Well, specs are one thing, but let's get down to the pictures. Let's start with the selfies itself, and Moto is just incredibly better. You get better details, the skin tones are, more accurate, and the HDR performance is superior too. And yeah, the selfie portraits have better edge cutouts and depth of field rendition as well. Another advantage on the Moto is that you get a wider attached lens on the selfie camera, so you get a wider field of view, so you can fit in more people as well, which is not the case with the Redmi 13C. Now, talking about the primary camera, the G34 just captures way more details than the Redmi 13C. And as for the colors, it is more faithful in rendering the scenes as well, especially when you use the natural color mode. The only aspect where Redmi does better is in HDR pictures with better control over the highlights and the shadows. But Moto does offer the auto enhance feature to improve the HDR and colors, so the option is actually kind of left to the users. And if you're shooting friends and family too, the G34 offers better details and better portrait mode pictures as well. The skin tones look much better than the Redmi 13C. Most importantly though, the low light performance is far superior on the Moto G34 compared to the Redmi 13C. The kind of pictures we got looked immediately far more impressive than what the Redmi 13C could achieve. Now, if you're shooting videos with these phones, you can do up to 1080p 30fps video recording from the front and the rear camera. But the G34 has electronic image stabilization and the Redmi 13C doesn't, so you get stabilized footage as well, which definitely is immediately an advantage on the G34. That about what we noticed is that the G34 definitely offers better sound recording quality with better environmental noise cancellation as well, which is very good. Recording from the Moto G34 and the Redmi 13C. This is what the quality looks like. My video recording from the Moto G34 and the Redmi 13C. This is what the quality looks like. So yeah, camera-wise, the G34 wins it hands down for me compared to the Redmi 13C. Now, if you're looking for a budget 5G phone in the 10 to 12,000 rupee price category, easily G34 would be my pick. There are a lot of factors that work in the favor of the phone, especially the fact that the Snapdragon 695 chip has been used at this price. It also has support for a lot of 5G bands plus VoNR as well. And definitely the camera performance of the G34 is better than the Redmi 13C too. And one more thing I must mention is that, of course, both these phones have a base 4 128GB variant, but the higher variant on the Redmi 13C is 6 128GB, whereas on Moto you get 8 128GB. So obviously the G34 is my recommendation, but it would have been awesome if the G34 also came with a Full HD Plus resolution and maybe an ultra wide angle camera as well. Now, if it had those two features, then I wouldn't have to do this comparison at all, because then that would just mean that the G34 wins against every other phone that I compare it with in this price class. So what did you guys think of this comparison? Do you pick the Moto G34 or the Redmi 13C? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.